So the key to us is actually doing less, okay? Because, I tell you, I mean, the hardest thing in the world is simplicity. It's easy to make something complex. It's spectacularly difficult to make something simple.
Technology is transforming how we think, how we lead, and how we win. From Intervision, this is Status Go, the show helping IT leaders move beyond the status quo, master their craft, and propel their IT vision.
Over the past several months, we have talked about experience, the user, customer, employee, total, and the digital experience. In this installment, we are going to talk to the CEO and founder of a company who has put the experience at the heart, no pun intended, of everything they do. Our guest today is Sandeep Akkaraju, and his company is Echo. That's EXO. Echo is a health information and devices company whose mission is to modernize medical imaging through its high-performance handheld ultrasound platform combined with artificial intelligence, enabling the healthcare professionals to make critical, real-time decisions that ultimately improve patient outcomes. Their approach to product design, vision, and creating an ecosystem has lessons for all of us, regardless of our industry. Welcome to Status Go, Sandeep.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me, and thanks for not butchering my name.
Was it close?
It's perfect.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I know I briefly introduced you to our audience, but would you mind sharing a bit more about your career journey?
Sure. Echo is my fourth startup, and really all of the startups that I've been involved with. I mean, it's no grand plan or grand scheme, but if I kind of connect the dots backward, all of the startups have been really at about a core thesis of how do you take a combination of nanotechnologies, semiconductors, a lot of software, and clearly the new element here is AI to fundamentally change the economic value proposition of an industry. Okay, so uh, again, the first startup that I was involved with, this is the early '90s when we all thought, hey, this internet thing may be big one day, right?
Yeah.
And here we are, right? Um, and that was really about working on technologies for the backbone of the internet itself. And my company prior to this was a lot of the motion sensing that you're seeing in watches and phones and AR, VR. Okay, all of the chipsets behind that. And Echo really has kind of been a culmination of a lot of my experiences. Okay, and how do you take those skill sets and really and apply it to what's important to me is really about healthcare equity, right? I mean, it's one of those big challenges that societies across the world face. Okay,
Mhm.
in providing equitable access to healthcare, and really, I mean, we focused on medical imaging because this was about um, a huge percentage of the population on this planet. I mean, 80% of the people, okay, billions of people have zero access to any medical imaging, right? So we said, hey, what if we could actually put this into the pockets of caregivers? Okay, and how could you change that? And how would that change patient care in a big way? Okay, I mean, going back into my journey, really, uh, always been interested in this intersection of medicine and technology. Okay, my
Mhm.
grandparents, where again, this is post-colonial India and building that country up, right, from the battered stage that the Brits left it in,
Yeah.
and this was about kind of building, and it started a hospital to kind of really serve the underserved.
Mhm.
My grandfather was a doctor. My grandmother was a nurse, and again, my dad really was an entrepreneur. He was kind of in the tech industry, and a space engineer by training. So had this I think, in my blood to kind of, I
Yeah, I
mean,
was going
really,
to say it's kind of in your blood. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, and so I think, and in a way, it kind of, I mean, seemed when I kind of, I mean, when we looked at medical imaging, it seemed like, hey, the fundamental core technologies hadn't changed, from for over 100 years, right? I mean, we
Hmm.
still kind of, I mean, have a doctor kind of put a ancient instrument on you to listen to what's happening inside you, right? I mean,
Yeah.
hey, it's the 21st century. What if we gave people a window into the body to actually see what's happening, right? And so there was that excitement in terms of, I mean,
Right,
what it
right.
means. But as we looked at it, we said, hey, how do we develop it in a way that, really changes access? Okay, I mean, to make
Hmm.
this have that really high quality imaging now in the palm of your hand. Okay, so and so that's a little bit about me
Yeah,
and what
yeah,
we're doing
yeah.
here at Echo.
Well, it's been a fascinating journey as I read back through your profile from IntelliSense to Jive and Fairfield, and now here at Echo. And you talked a little bit about the problem set that you are working on right now with Echo. How did that problem set inspire the vision that you have conveyed to those who join Echo and inspire them to follow that vision? How did that come to fruition?
I think it's medicine is one of those fields where it's such an integral part of healthcare, is such an integral part of who we are as humans, right? And here's an ability to kind of, I mean, fundamentally move the human race forward in a big way, okay,
Hmm.
by bringing access, and bringing and bringing healthcare to caregivers around the world, give them tools,
Hmm.
okay, to and that's kind of, I mean, really at the core of who we are at Echo. We're tool builders, okay,
Hmm.
and we want to kind of, I mean, provide these tools that give doctors and nurses a superpower, right? I mean, to be able
Yeah.
to look into the body. I mean, it's not X-ray vision, but close enough. But
Well, it's even
so I think
better, right? It's better than X-ray.
exactly. I mean, X-rays are ionizing and radiating, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
anybody who has, you don't want to be subjecting yourself to a lot of X-rays. So let me put it
yeah.
that way. So this is, so I think, and and for us, I mean, it's always been about that mission, and from the very beginning of the company. I mean, I see a lot of tech companies that pivot, 5 times. I mean, depending on which way the wind blows, and
Hmm.
we've stayed true to our core mission, but taking on and solving some of the biggest problems around the world. Okay,
Yeah,
so I think that makes it easy to kind of, I mean, attract people who want to do big things. Okay, who
yeah.
dream big and want kind of, I mean, have that impact. And we've been. I think that's what makes my job. I mean, just incredibly rewarding is
Hmm.
working with people who are equally passionate
Yeah.
about changing the world for the better.
People that share the passion and share the vision. That's got to feel incredible. And as I mentioned in my intro, we've been talking a lot about experience in some of the previous episodes here on Status Go. Would you mind sharing your approach to experience, the user experience, and how it is driving your product development?
Sure. As I mentioned at Echo, I mean, we are we're tool makers, right? And if you think about the best tools out there, okay, they kind of, I mean, have this sense to kind of, I mean, almost disappear and meld with the human body, right? They become
Yeah.
extensions of yourself, and that's really what we are striving for, is that excellence on making that tool disappear. I mean, but
Hmm.
become almost second nature, and when you kind of, I mean, use it, it's like, yeah, it's incredibly powerful technology, but making it incredibly familiar, right? I mean, in to
Hmm.
be able to fit into your everyday world. And so that's kind of, I mean, really at that core is developing a language around familiarity.
Hmm.
And as you kind of mean, of course, I mean, that's kind of mean a big part of it, but leading people up to that experience is how do you actually kind of mean set up those little moments, okay, within the usage of the tool that kind of make you go, wow, they thought of that too, right? I mean, so
Yeah, yeah.
and that's really an art is
Hmm.
is both that discoverability and building a deep tool that
Hmm.
gives you an ability to kind of, I mean, do a lot of things. I mean, in
Yeah.
terms of, looking at the lungs is very different than imaging the heart, to kind of, I mean, doing and really we focus that on jobs to be done, right? I mean, what are
Hmm.
the jobs that the users want to do, and how do we really nail that experience so that it just becomes an extension of
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. I
I think
love
that's
that concept of surprising the user that, oh wow, they thought of that. I love that concept.
And I think that kind of, I mean, it's that takes a lot of focus, because it's about, as tool makers or product designers, you have a tendency to kind of, I mean, want to do everything for the user, right? I mean, you've got to kind of, I mean, trust the
Hmm.
intelligence of the user and kind of say, hey, where do you draw that line in leading them, okay, and saying, okay, yeah, that works exactly like it's supposed to work, right? Without
Yeah.
and that's when kind of, I mean, it's like, okay, I already know how to use this, and so the key to us is actually doing less, okay, but really nailing those elements, because I tell you, I mean, the hardest thing in the world is simplicity, right? I mean, it's easy to make something complex. It's spectacularly difficult to make something simple.
I would imagine that as your product teams are faced with a myriad of decisions, they are keeping not only the vision front and center, but they're keeping that user experience front and center to drive their everyday decisions. Is that kind of baked in across the organization, that mindset?
I think one of the things that we're trying to do out here is take something very esoteric, right? I mean, as a medical imager, and make that almost into an appliance, right? I mean,
Hmm.
it's kind of like, I mean, we joke about how do we toasterize, uh, ultrasound, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
I think, it's like, hey, a toaster's got a few controls out there, and it's not, well, I mean, now not those fancy, expensive $400 toasters, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
talking about kind of, I mean, so that's kind of, I mean, the thing is,
Hmm.
is really, if you focus that on what are the jobs that the user wants to get done, and how do you kind
Yeah,
of, I mean, present that uh, as an interface, and that's kind of, I mean, the brilliance of kind of, I mean, building on top of a touchscreen interface, right, where you can actually,
hmm,
it can transform into an experience depending on what you're doing, and so I think, it's hard. It's hard. I mean,
yeah,
I think we all have a tendency to want to do more, and it's like saying no
yeah.
to things is hard. And
Less is more. Less is more. Well, I know you rely a lot on cloud technologies, and many of our listeners are in the IT profession. They deal with cloud, and I know in your development process and in the operation of your products, you're leveraging cloud. And when you think about healthcare in a heavily regulated industry like healthcare, cloud can sometimes be a hurdle. So, what obstacles have you encountered, and how have you been able to navigate around them or through them?
I mean, honestly, it's a great question. Okay, I mean, has me a little, have to use my gray cells a bit to think about it, but uh, uh, if you step back and look at it, right? I mean, there's been this notion in the valley that software is going to eat the world, right? I mean,
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
Mark Andreessen has said that, and really, I mean, cloud is kind of means central to that thesis, right? I mean, and if you're designing a product in 2022, I mean, it's kind of like saying somebody at the turn of last century to, okay, design me a product, but I don't want to use this newfangled thing called electricity, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and of course, I mean, I think with healthcare today being a regulated industry, I mean, it's one of those last bastions that's kind of, I mean, not fallen to,
Hmm.
you know, to software as a service, as an example, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, listen, I mean, there's certain things we can control. We are focused on the top line out here, which is delivering amazing experiences and making it super simple to use.
Hmm.
Okay. And we believe that, again, there's going to be some people who are not going to want to touch what we're doing, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
okay. Okay. But we are seeing this shift, okay, even within medicine, okay, because everybody wants to use tools that are immediately familiar to them, right? I mean, that
Hmm.
fit into their day-to-day work. And so much of our work today is done in these micro interactions, right? I mean, you may be uh, texting your colleague when you're kind of in a grocery checkout line, right? I mean,
Yeah.
or and those are little jobs to be done throughout the day, where you kind of, I mean, take a big job and you can parcel that out and do it in moments. And that's how the world works today. So there's going to be, I mean, a certain amount of people who are really drawn to that experience, and because
Hmm.
because we need to build products that fit into people's lives, and that's an important core paradigm here at Echo.
Yeah.
And we see the cloud as a key enabler to that.
Kind of related to that, the other thing that I hear often with uh, product vendors that are trying to get their products in the hands of the medical professionals is sometimes the internal IT department of the hospital or the practice can kind of get in the way because you're trying to show the doctors and the nursing, that professional staff, how wonderful the Echo tool is, and IT's over here saying, "But yeah, you can't bring that in my hospital." Have you guys run into that?
Listen, I mean, our feeling out here is we feel like the IT is actually an ally. If you know how to kind of, I mean, really talk tech and can explain what you're doing and what you're not doing, right?
Hmm.
Because the key thing in medicine is really, I mean, I think everybody has seen all of the bad actors in the valley who kind of, I mean, now want to monetize, eyeballs, right? And we see where that's kind of led. Okay, and there is a genuine fear about kind of, I mean, protecting patient privacy, right?
Yeah.
And Echo, that's a really important thing for us. Is actually the data doesn't, we are only custodians to data. Okay, the data belongs to the patient, right? I
Hmm.
mean, the healthcare system and Echo, we're just custodians. Okay, the data is yours. You choose how you control that, right? So if you start off with that premise rather than saying,
Hmm.
hey, I'm going to mine as much data as possible, okay, on you, because now you're kind of, I mean, talking about some things that are very personal, right? I mean,
Hmm.
and clearly, I mean, there's people who want to monetize those, but at Echo, I mean, we've made a very conscious choice not to do so, right? So
Hmm.
approaching it from that philosophical standpoint actually allows you to kind of, I mean, have a cogent conversation, okay? Because,
Hmm.
IT very often is seen as a roadblock. I mean, we see
Yeah.
them as an important, guardian to patient data. So
Yeah.
it's a um, yeah. I mean, I think you've got to
Yeah.
it's we don't see that as an uphill battle. Okay, we see
Hmm.
that as like, hey, here's what we're doing. We're open about it. Here's how we are protecting the information throughout.
Yeah.
Okay, and here's how we make sure that we are not even seeing that data, right?
Right. I love that. In fact, your comment surprised me. I thought I knew what you were going to say when you were talking about you're the custodians of the data belongs to. And I thought you were going to say to the doctors and the medical staff, and instead you said it belongs to me, the patient. And I
That's
think
right.
that's an interesting mindset to take, a position, a filter to take on data that, gosh, I don't know that it matters whether it's healthcare or not. Who does the data belong to, right? And at the end of the day, it belongs to the person that the data is about, right? My personal
That's right.
information is my personal information.
That's right.
And so when you have these conversations with the IT department, it sounds like you're able to make them an ally in this duty to protect the patient data.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, the and I think that's important. Okay, and that's just kind of, table stakes for us.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to pivot again to something that I learned about you. I've learned that you're a fan of the book Tiny Habits. And I'd love to hear how you've taken those concepts, both in your life, whatever you can share about how you've incorporated them in your life, but also how Echo uses that philosophy to increase the adoption of its products.
Again, Tiny Habits was it's really about life hacking, right? I mean, it's about the power of small behavioral changes that can and by adopting small habits, right? I mean, it's about behavioral change and it's about adoption of small habits that can have a major impact on your life. I mean, that's the thesis, and
Mm-hmm.
and what we are trying to do here at Echo is ultimately behavioral change, right? I mean, we're
Mm-hmm.
doctors are getting them to adopt a new piece of kit. It's not just enough to say, hey, here's a here's a cool gadget, right? It's
Yeah.
important to kind of figure out how it fits into their workflow, okay, and how it fits into their daily life, so that how they can make room for what we are doing into their lives, okay, and guide them through, okay, and making that behavioral change over time.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about fundamentally changing the practice of medicine in a big way,
Yeah.
right? I mean, rather than, we're saying look into the body, okay, and to be able to do that is driving behavioral change at mass scale. Okay, it's really important for that user adoption,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, we think that that's a pretty big part of adoption. Is so uh, you know, and we've adopted, a few of those principles, and how do you kind of allow people to make room for a new habit in their life,
Yeah.
and in this
Yeah.
case, rather than kind of reaching out for your stethoscope, okay, reach out for our device, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's like,
Yeah.
rather than reaching out for, I don't know, a bag of chips, you're reaching out for a slightly better alternative out there, right? So that's
Yeah.
behavioral change, and
Yeah.
that's really, I think, where that thinking comes from.
I like that when I think and listen to what you're saying there. There's a lot of, not that status quo is changing the world of medicine in a big way. I don't mean to imply that our podcast does things like that, but we're trying to do the same thing, right? We're trying to encourage our listeners to take tiny steps to change a habit, change their perception, and drive big change. So that really resonates with me. The other thing that I understand that you have incorporated in places within Echo is the concept of gamification. How does that? How are you using that in Echo? Or is it within the product? Is it within the company? Is it both?
You know, Again, we haven't explicitly looked at gamification at Echo, okay, but we've really explored it from the idea of representation, right?
Mm-hmm.
In not so much in kind of putting in, and but um, and the key to familiarity is representation, right? I mean, when the original Macintosh came out, right? I mean, they had this metaphor for your desk, on the
Hmm.
computer, right? You have the desktop, and that kind of, I mean, immediately presented some very arcane computer concepts like files, okay, as
Hmm.
documents, right? And it kind of, I mean, so, and in that sense, that representation of something very complex in very familiar terms, okay, is important. Okay, so I kind of, I mean, I'm not sure if that's kind of, I mean, more in the realm of kind of, I mean, making those metaphorical connections
Yeah,
or
yeah,
gamification. But I think there's certain elements in terms of gamification and kind of, I mean, really allowing people to kind of, I mean, you know, say you have a student, okay, who's learning, a medical student or resident who's learning ultrasound, right? I mean, how do you
hmm,
give them that motivation to kind of say, hey, here's your activity today, here's the progress that you've made, okay, and
hmm.
here's kind of, I mean, uh, so I think, in those tiny ways we're kind of, I mean, it's not, I wouldn't call it gamification, it's kind
In
of
the pure
those
sense, yeah,
nudges and ability to kind of, I mean, score yourself or look how you kind of compare with your peers,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah.
So I think those are the areas where we kind of made looked at.
When you think about Echo and the evolution of the product, are you viewing it as I'll use a metaphor that we all know, our smartphones, right? Are you looking at it as a platform that other people, other entities, other companies will build and extend what Echo does?
No, absolutely. I mean, internally, we think powerful tools like what we do. Okay, we can't solve every problem in medicine ourselves, right? I mean,
Hmm.
and very often in medicine, I mean, the human body is incredibly complex. Okay, and to build tools, they have to be very organ specific, very pathology specific, very disease state specific. And we can't necessarily do all of that. I mean, and we can do some of it, but we rely on partners to do to um, to develop tools on top of what we are
Hmm.
doing. So that's a really important aspect of, it's important for us to be open and kind of, I mean, acknowledge that we can't do everything. Okay, but let's
Yeah.
team up with people to kind of, I mean, solve big problems.
Create an ecosystem or centered on the patient.
Or
Yeah,
an
yeah.
ecosystem in our case. But
Hey, there, yes, an ecosystem. Yes, I should have pronounced it that way. That's great. That's
well,
awesome.
but yeah.
Well, Sandeep, I know as we were talking just a minute ago, part of what we're trying to do with this podcast is encourage our listeners to take action. There, a lot of our listeners are in corporate IT. Some are in the tech sector, such as companies all around you there out on the coast. But they're IT, they're tech professionals, and we're trying to encourage them to take change, to make change, to break out of the status quo. So, are there one or two things that you would recommend our listeners do tomorrow because they listened to our conversation today?
I mean, I think, one is kind of, I mean, really that part of just taking the small steps, right? I mean, in what you do. And, and one of the philosophies that we have really, I mean, for me is it's about simplicity, right? I mean, it's a
Hmm.
incredibly cluttered world, okay? And it's an incredibly complex world. I mean, how can we, as professionals, make someone else's life a bit easier, right? I mean, if you can focus on simplifying everything that you do, from how you communicate, okay, to get across to um, how you design products or
Hmm.
support your client base in a simpler manner, in a less cluttered manner, okay, without get to the core of that experience and strip away what else can you strip away, right? Be
Avoid, yeah.
relentless in stripping away and get to the core of what is it that you do. And um, yeah, no, I think that's kind of, I mean, I think again, I mean,
Yeah, I love
it's
that.
it kind of goes back um, to to Thoreau, right? I mean,
Yeah,
famously said, "Simplify, simplify, simplify," and
simplify. Yeah,
uh,
I, I,
and
I
I
love I
guess
love that advice. It's advice that our listeners can take action on. Take small steps, and at all points, simplify, simplify, simplify. I love that, Sandeep. So I really want to thank you for carving out time to talk to us. I know the life of an entrepreneur is filled with chaotic days, and I love that you carved out time to speak with us. So thank you so very much, Sandeep.
Oh, no, thank you, Jeff. Pleasure's all mine. And really, thanks for having me on your show.
To our listeners, if you have a question or want to learn more, visit intervision.com. The show notes will provide links and contact information. This is Jeff Tunn for Sandeep Akkaraju. Thank you very much for listening.
You've been listening to the Status Go podcast. You can subscribe on iTunes or get more information at intervision.com. If you'd like to contribute to the conversation, find Intervision on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Thank you for listening. Until next time.